Hello and welcome to the Practitioner Podcast. This is a podcast from us at Renaissance, a network of missional practitioners and microchurches in the greater Boston area. Every episode, we talk about themes around living on mission and living in microchurch community. Our conversations are always practical, touching on the realities of everyday ordinary people, and this is because our mission is all about cultivating beautiful kingdom people embedded in the everyday stuff of life. And if you've listened to any prior episodes, you've already picked up and noticed that Christine Lee is not here, who typically does this intro. It's just me, Drew Thurman. She is traveling as we speak to Hong Kong to be with some family. So I think she's somewhere over the Pacific Ocean. So I'm hosting solo this time, but I am not alone on this episode because I am joined by the one and only Fabricio Paes. How's it going, Fabricio?
I'm doing well. Thanks for fumbling my name. Hey, everyone. Drew has trouble with multiple syllables.
I was deciding whether I wanted to call you Fab or Fabricio.
Yeah, you're like Fabricio.
Yeah.
Nice.
So.
I used to be on these podcasts. If you've never heard me before, and then I got kicked off for some reason. I don't know why or what, but it became Drew and Christine's thing, which is more than fine for me. I'm sure Drew got enough emails about the stuff I say on podcasts. So, hey everyone, nice to meet you if we haven't met.
Yeah. We're gonna get to hear a lot more of your story, but yes, we canceled you, and we're letting you come back for one episode.
I'm airing my grievances right now. By the way, I've never even brought it up to you guys that you cut me off the podcast, but here we are.
So we're going to have you tell a lot more about yourself, but why don't you, in like a few sentences, just really quickly, you're obviously on our Renaissance team. You're one of our microchurch leaders, but beyond that, give us a little bit of a description of who you are.
Yeah. Fabricio Paes, married to Kimberly Paes. We have two boys, Oliver and Elijah, 11 and soon to be 8 years old here in July. I live in East Boston. If you have ever heard me talk or spend 2 seconds with me, you'll know. Boston born and bred. I've lived in the neighborhood 98% of my life. I along with what I do here at Renaissance, I work in biotech. That's what I do, with most of my time, work-wise. I build applications that hospitals use, which is putting my Bible degree to good use. So, we'll end there.
Well, we always have some topic at the top end, kind of an icebreaker we chat about. I think you've listened to the episode, so you know.
Yeah.
So I thought it'd be kind of fun for this one. We love your random hot takes. That's kind of what you're known for in our network and on our team. And we've also, as a team, we've really fallen in love with the Instagram account Subway Takes, where if you've never seen it, there's this guy who interviews random strangers and sometimes celebrities, but mostly random strangers, ask for their hot takes while riding the subway. So I thought, in just the theme of that, inspired by it, Fab, I would give us a hot take.
Oh boy. Here we go. Now, this hot take, let me preface it here, will only make sense to anyone in an urban setting.
Yep.
Generally. So I'll go there. And this is a hot take that will not be near and dear to Drew's heart at all. So I'll say that as well. Just creating some tension here. My hot take is that if you are a proponent, advocate, government official passing laws that reduces or removes requirements for parking, or you decide you want to reduce or remove driving lanes for bus lanes or bike lanes, you must spend 12 months using only public transportation and nothing else. No Ubers, no Uber Eats, nothing. I want nothing. You get a bike, you get the subway, or you get the train or a bus. And that's all you can do for 12 months. And until you've proven that that's how you live your life, I don't want to hear your policies, your advocacy, or anything else. because these people show up to our neighborhood meetings and put all these bike lanes. There's bike lanes downtown. There's lanes downtown where you have a bike lane, a car lane, a bus lane. Everything's painted. There's like dotted lines. X marks the spot. It's like freaking Jack Sparrow out here finding the hidden treasure downtown because there's so much going on. It's like a real life treasure map everywhere you go. So my point is, these people show up to these meetings and you know what they do? Yeah, bike lanes. They get in their car, they drive home, and they park in their driveway. So put your money where your mouth is. Go do your groceries on the bus. Find a way to get to your kid's soccer game, taking the commuter rail. Live your life that way, and then talk to me about public transportation. And I'll end with this. I spent many years riding public transportation and not driving to work, to school, all of it. So I know what it's like. I know what it's all about. But cut the nonsense and hypocrisy. If you're going to tell me you want walkable cities, sell your car first.
You know what? I actually agree with you.
Nice.
It took a turn there. I was just expecting I know how much you hate bike lanes, so I was expecting it just to be a hot take about bike lanes, but
no.
I 100% agree with you. Everyone who advocates for these policies should actually have to feel the pain.
100%.
That they actually know what they're talking.
Yes.
That they know what they're talking about. Yeah. I'm 100%. I'm in on that. 100%. I will back anyone who's willing to.
Let's go. I think we need to run for office. Let's go.
Yeah. I think that's very reasonable. So
okay.
Yeah,
it's a hot take. It's against alternative modes of transportation, but that's how I feel. I hope you all felt the passion in my voice if you're listening. You certainly saw the passion in my eyes if you're watching.
Wow. But what people don't know who are listening to this or watching this is the countless hours of your life that you've wasted circling blocks in your neighborhood, trying to find a spot to park.
1 hour sometimes.
Yes. And so just to give some reference for those that don't understand what it's like to suffer and find street parking. That's why Fab's like, don't take any more spots away. I don't want an hour and a half.
Seriously. Right. Because everybody's going to ride their bikes everywhere. No, they're not. Yeah. Especially not in East Boston. They're going to float across the harbor downtown on their bike. Oh, man.
No, that's great. I love it.
What's your hot take? I gave one. You need one now.
I'll just piggyback. I've got lots of hot takes, but I'll piggyback on that. I personally, as someone who walks almost every day to work and get almost hit by cars on a regular basis, I've actually said this something very similar to Bria. I think our city government should be forced to do walking tours of every single person that makes decisions, just so they can just experience what it's like to deal with the pain of crosswalks and, some of the decisions they make about where you should and cannot walk, what the speed limit is, all sorts of things. Like you just don't think about it until you're actually on the street level and you're not just flying by. There's a lot of stuff that's really dangerous. So, and as someone I walk my girls to school every day, or a couple days a week. Bree walks them the others, but we walk them every day to school, and there's no parking at the school for anyone. There's no drop-off line, so you have to walk. It's a neighborhood school. You have to walk your kids, and the roads to get there. It's like I've watched a kid, almost get hit multiple times. My mother-in-law watched a kid get hit on a bike. It's like, this is nuts. So, but none of our city officials understand any of that because, as you said, they're in their Mercedes, flying on by to the next meeting. So I'm 100% with you, Fab. Okay. And as a podcast about practitionership, I think this is great because what you're advocating for is put your money where your mouth is. Be a practitioner. Don't talk about it. Don't theorize it.
Don't tell me I got to take the train. You take the train first. And you be late to work every day and you sit in hot trains with, not always showered people. And then you talk to me about what's going on.
Or live in the final destination that is at any moment a possible derailment. So anyways, we could hate on the MBTA for the rest of our episode, but we won't do that. But we on this show, on the Practitioner Podcast, we advocate for practitionership, And we typically, Christine or I, or bring a theme and take turns, or sometimes, like this episode, we host guests who are going to chat about certain themes. That's obviously Fab on this episode, Fabricio. And
Yeah.
the theme Fab's going to be talking about is why neighboring isn't just missional, but it's actually a discipleship journey, which sounds really simple, but is a pretty profound idea when you actually start walking it out. So before I ask you, I've got tons of questions to pummel you with, but why don't you just give us a little bit of background on this topic, and maybe just the same, we just got to see a little bit of your passion and fire. Why is this something that you're passionate about?
Yeah, why don't we start with how I wasn't always passionate about
Yeah,
it
that'd be great.
quickly. But I mentioned in the intro, I've lived in this neighborhood my whole life. It's a neighborhood, East Boston. It's a part of the city of Boston. And growing up, it was a pretty rundown place. My parents are both immigrants. They're from Brazil. And we didn't always have a lot growing up necessarily. They both worked very hard manual labor jobs. So, grown up in Eastie, it was not as developed or gentrified as it is today. It was kind of the armpit of the city. We always got everything last. Other parts of the city started to really develop first. All that to say, I just wanted to get out, to be honest. I felt this calling to do ministry from my teenage years, and my dream was always to do it somewhere else, at some cool city somewhere on the West Coast or in the South. I don't know, but it was gonna be like city boy leaves the city and goes to like bring the coolness in ministry somewhere else. That's what I always thought was gonna happen. But God had other plans, I would say. Um, I have some distinct memories of, surprisingly, being on the subway. So I took the subway. I took two city buses and two subway trains, different lines, to high school, to school, and back from school every single day. And then when I got jobs downtown, same thing. I took a bus and a train into town, a bus, two trains into town to go to work and then back. So I've spent many, many, many hours riding public transportation. And interestingly enough, I'm expressing how I just wanted to get out of here, but then, I was still here, and there would be these moments where I would be sitting on the subway, and usually this goes way back, but I'd be reading the sports section of the newspaper, or I had my like Sony Discman, so I'm like playing CDs on this thing and like listening. I had this big brick that I like carried all my CDs in with the Discman, and I carried that around. Um, there'd be these moments where I just, looking back now, just felt this nudging of the spirit, and I would look up, and the only way I can describe this is that I would really see somebody. Like, I would look at them and I would be overwhelmed with emotion, and I had no idea why. This is like 22-year-old guy, like suddenly like welling up in tears, looking at someone and just feeling like, wow, I really see them. And then feeling like that's how God views people. And these are people from my neighborhood. These were working class people. Maybe were coming home from a really long shift, or going to work on a really early shift at 6 a.m. because I had to be at school really early. So I'd be riding the T at 6 every day in high school. And I just felt like this empathy and compassion. And this wasn't like all the time, but I could think of 2 or 3 times where this happened, and I was just like kind of taken aback at, wow, what is this all about? And I truly think that was where God started to soften my heart for the people who live around me, because I didn't hate being here, but I just felt like it wasn't my place. And I think even then God was starting to help me to see people the way he sees them, as cheesy as that may sound. I really needed that because, as Drew knows, Bostonians, we're hard people. So, it takes a little bit of breaking down for us to let people in. Um,
Well, real quick, I want to just
yeah,
jump in
yeah,
because
yeah,
I want to translate for people on this episode and just pause, because one of the things, uh, like, you were forced into this based off of your, some of your life circumstances.
yeah,
But obviously, one of the things we advocate for, and one of the things we want, um, anybody to go, why we teach this in our practitioner pathway, is to kind of go on a pilgrimage in their own place, their own city, their own neighborhood, to actually experience people and God there, and to have the moment that you're describing, that there is a spiritual discipline of walking and inhabiting our place and allowing God to speak through our neighbor to us. And one of the things we're always advocating for is, like, how do you kind of open and re-engage your senses to have the kind of moments that you were just describing. So hopefully it doesn't, if it is something that sounds strange to you, what Fab's describing, this would be a great plug to join our practitioner pathway, because we're going
yes.
to help give you some practices to maybe have that sort of moment for yourself where you're at, and maybe allow the Spirit to speak. So continue on, but I just wanted to give that plug.
No, absolutely. So at some point, my heart is starting to soften for for the people around me. Um, and long story short, I think it's made pretty clear to me, um, God just kind of speaking to my heart that, oh, I'm gonna be here in Boston. This is where He has me. Um, so I said, okay, I get this. This is no cool church for me. Like, we're gonna do this hard thing here in Boston. Let's see what God's got. And I started to ask a lot of questions about the way we did church because, you know, growing up in a traditional church setting, it's like, bring your friends, bring your neighbors. And I don't want to say I was asking everybody, but I certainly invited people to come to church with me and was never successful. Um, but what I was really successful at is never spending time in my neighborhood because I was so busy doing church things. So it's like, oh, bring your neighbors. Who are they? Right? Do I know my neighbors? Do I talk to my neighbors? Am I involved in my neighborhood? Um, and, you know, started to think about what would it look like to be intentional, about living my life as much as I could here in the neighborhood and becoming a participant in the community and contributing to the community and thinking about, well, what can I bring? What can I do to help our neighborhood? That was my thought process at that time, and I know we'll delve deeper into that later. But what are the ways I can serve? Right, that's language that we hear in church all the time about serving others, and those were things I really wanted to do, and you know, eventually stepped down off an elder board from a church plant here downtown Boston, and had decided, chatting with my wife, I said, I think we need more time in Eastie, if we want to live out these dreams that we have for the neighborhood. So I think we need to spend more time there, and our church activities are getting in the way. And she agreed. I was asking her a big thing, but she was like, yeah, that makes sense. Um, and that whole time, I really, and just to give her a bit, this is like, for context, for anybody listening, this is like maybe a 10-year period of God starting to soften my heart, feeling, me finally going into Bible school I was like 25 years old when I did that, 24 years old when I went back to school. So, it's like almost over a decade of time of getting to that place where I felt like, yeah, God really wants me to be in East Boston, and to be a part of the community, even if that means I'm not participating as often in all the church leadership and activity things that always go on.
I think that's an awesome description. And I think there's probably a lot of people that can resonate with what you were wrestling through. One, I appreciate that you talk that it takes some time. And I think sometimes we want people to be where we're at without going through the process it took us to get where we're at.
Yep.
And so it's okay to just talk about the fact that, for some people, maybe this is an overnight thing, but I think for a lot of us, it's a slow burn, a slow fade that takes us a while. And there's a lot of experiences that get us there. But I want to kind of transition the conversation a little bit, because this is a conversation we talk a lot about at Renaissance, is just about what does it look like to maybe step away from some of the existing paradigms and say, what does it look like to inhabit my place, to care about my neighborhood, to begin to join God there. But I think probably the first iteration for all of us is we go in thinking, like you just described, I'm going to go be the one to change my neighborhood. We've maybe given, I don't know if it's on this podcast or on our old one that we used to do with Renaissance, but we talk a lot of this imagery that I think a lot of us think that, like in this imagery, like I have the Spirit, I have the light, I go into the darkness, there is no light there until I show up.
Yep.
And I'm going to bring the light to the dark world. And I know, and this is what I really would like you to talk about, that I'm sure you had some of those same thoughts, which is okay to
Definitely
own.
did.
I've had those same thoughts too, but your perspective began to change as you actually begun to do the work and beginning to realize the importance of mutuality. So I'd love for you to talk about what was that transition like, and then now where you're at, where do you see God using your neighbors to help you grow in faith?
Yeah, I think I have the luxury of living in the greatest city in the world, number one.
I'm about to spit out my water. I love it.
and what I mean by that is a lot of things, but I'll just carve out one small piece. So to your point, I remember sitting and thinking with Cam, like, oh, what are we gonna do? Like, no offense, Drew, should we start a coffee shop? Should we start some program, or should we go serve at the homeless shelter? All the kind of traditional service-oriented activities. We're like kind of brainstorming, what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? This is how we're going to save the world. This is how we're going to save East Boston, right? Like, we're going to, all these people are going to love us, and they're just going to be like, I want to know about Jesus. Like, you're doing amazing things. And it was all going to be so easy. Where that started to change was when we started to get involved in the neighborhood. So first thing we discovered is that all the things we thought we could do were already happening, and they were doing it way better than I was going to do it. So that's what I mean about, one of the reasons it's the greatest city in the world is that everything, like even in our neighborhood, we've got, Eastie Farms, we've got Zoomix, which is a youth music program. We've got, this group that Eastie Tree something, and they're planting trees everywhere. We've got neighborhood child activities all over the place. There's food pantries going on, multiple food pantries. There's
Eastie bikers.
Literally, like, there's free workout groups. There's run clubs. There's just everything, right? So there was nothing that like, oh, I'm going to start this thing that's just revolutionary and nobody's ever seen it before. Wrong. I don't have
by the way,
ideas.
that's very suburban thinking, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are places you can pull that off, but in the city in particular, you can't. Yeah.
No, it's all here.
Yeah.
So we had to put that aside, be like, all right, well, let's find some things to start participating in. And what we started to do is to involve ourselves in the life of the neighborhood, whether that be attending neighborhood-wide events. There's big Halloween events. There's this day called Eastie Pride Day. There's just constantly, there was a taco fest. I remember one time, and they had all the Latino restaurants come and sell tacos, and to help them, just kind of gain awareness and raise money. And, we just started to go to these things and um, become a part of some nonprofit organizations. And at least I'll speak in my case, I was invited to participate on a board and thinking, hey, like I've got all this experience, I'm going to bring all this stuff. And sitting amongst people, who had served on this board for 20 years, you know, I started to realize, man, I have a lot to learn from these people
Mm,
about serving, about sacrifice, about putting others above yourself. I always thought, oh, well, because I learned it in church, I must be really good at it. But it's not until you sit amongst true legends in a neighborhood like mine, where people have given so much. And earlier I said, hey, the neighborhood was so run down. These are the people who helped bring the neighborhood to where it is today over the decades. Um, and then I started to realize, no, I have things to learn. So I think that was the first posture, really, where mutuality started to become a thing inside of me. Is that I'm not the expert here. I'm learning. I'm the disciple, right? And I'm here to see, what are these people doing? How are they approaching others? How do they have grace? How do they love others? Even if they aren't Christians, these are people who are exhibiting very Christ-like, um, you know, uh, characteristics. So I'll use that as a lead-in, but that's really to me, and maybe I could speak for my wife a little bit as well, although she's much more servant oriented than I could ever be.
yeah.
Um,
Well, I love the posture that you're talking about being a learner and about discovering a lot of things. Yeah. And I mean, we talk a lot about that, the same thing in our neighborhood. There are people who are doing incredible work. How do we help? How do we come alongside them? How do we learn from them? How do we not take, a position of power, but of powerlessness, that we show up and we say, um, just because I know Jesus does not mean I get to come in like a wrecking ball.
hmm
And, I really love, we talk about it in our cohort, but Willie James Jennings, really brilliant scholar, teaches at Yale, has this quote. He says, I want Christians to recognize the grotesque nature of a social performance of Christianity that imagines Christian identity floating above land, landscape, animals, place, and space. And I think a lot of us kind of go in with that arrogance of like, it's almost because we know Jesus, we're somehow detached from the realities and the struggles and the need to learn from the people of our neighborhood
yeah.
the way everyone else is. So I love what you're describing, but I would love you to just go a step further in that. We talked about mutuality. So it's not just like learning, but I know in from having conversations with you, having coffee with you, getting texts from you, um, that you've been a recipient. You feel like, hey, my neighborhood's teaching me as much as I'm, teaching it. It's serving me as much as I'm serving it. So just talk maybe a little bit about, um, as you've been learning, what is it like to just say, yes, I know Jesus, but I'm also a human. I also need companionship. I need friendship. I
Yeah.
need, I need people to care for me too. And so could you maybe just talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So for those of you who may not know me, which is most people listening to this, I very much struggle with asking for help. I I'm like a fixer. I just want to fix everything for everyone, and if it's for me, I just hold it in or deal with it. Um, and one of the most beautiful things that has happened in our community is a group of friends that Kim and I have made. We call ourselves the Eastie Crew, and this is about 5 or 6 families that, you know, most of our kids have gone to school together their whole lives. They hang out after school every day at each other's homes. We get together for basically every holiday, birthdays, major events, and this group has really become family. And something I've had to learn over the years is to accept help. from other people in this crew, you know? Um, we've got one guy who works for Napa Auto Parts. And, I remember one time, I think our like car battery was being funky or something. And he was like, oh, like what? So we're just either, I don't know if Ken was talking about it in the chat or something. And then I get a text and it's like, what kind of car do you have? Like, what is he? What? So I tell him the car. He's like, okay, I'll meet you at your house in like an hour. I'm picking up a battery at the shop. I'm bringing my battery tester. I'm going to test your car, see if your battery's okay. If it
Mm,
is, I'll have the replacement battery and I'll put it in for you. And I'll be very honest, I felt so weird about that because I was not at a place where I was ready to accept that
mm,
mutuality of giving and serving. And I was like, oh no, like now I have to owe a favor, right? That like weird
yeah,
thing where
yeah.
it's like if somebody does something for you, now you owe them. And
Hmm.
um, we didn't even ask, and he did this, right? And he came and he tested the battery, and the battery was bad. He changed out the battery himself, and um, the our friends, these are people that would literally take their shirts off their back for you. Um, and it's not just friends. Um, even people, acquaintances, random people that we meet in the neighborhood. Um, if you have a need and you express it, people are always so willing to jump in and say, "Hey, yeah, I can help you with that." Or, um, I think another beautiful example is there's this email chain that goes around in East where it's just like free stuff.
Mm,
And um, we've had situations where Kim would go on and be like, maybe we need something for the boys, and she'll shoot an email out, and you've got all these strangers showing up at your house and be like, oh yeah, I have that here. You can have mine, or like you can borrow mine if you need this. And it's people we've never even met, who will come through and let us borrow a 10 by 10 tent or something because some event's going on and we don't have enough at the school, and she'll put out, this request, and all of a sudden neighbors and strangers are letting us borrow stuff. Um, yeah, so it's just a beautiful thing, and it's been something that's changed me a lot to be able to ask for help and accept help.
mm.
Even asking, like you can ask and then kind of skirt it, but like to ask it and accept it,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
I want to say it's like humbling, but I don't mean it in like a demeaning way. It's just,
No,
I think that how it's humbling to have people caring for you and loving you that way.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
I
it's funny,
want,
we pray for humility. I'll just end on
yeah.
this. Like, how often we say, like, God, I want to be humble, but like we don't do the things that make us humble. But like that's a perfect example, I think, mutuality of God like allowing you to be humble where like somebody else serves you.
Yeah. Well, I think you're describing, I mean, we talk a lot about an embodied faith, and what you're describing is like, again, just because I have come to know Jesus, and just because I recognize transcendence in my life, doesn't mean that I don't have needs. It doesn't mean that I'm suddenly uh, more intelligent than everyone else around me. I'm still a person.
Hmm.
And so every single person I meet, every person I rub shoulders with, the people I befriend, they have ways of serving me. They have ways that God can use them to teach me, speak words into me. I can tell you many times, like there's somebody I'm praying for, and like, man, I really would love to have this moment of being able to help them have this epiphany with God. And God, I think sometimes almost, every time I seem to be praying for someone like that, seems to use them to teach me, kind of like
Mm,
just to remind you, like, hey, like the goal is not just outputs. Like
yeah.
there is no one who's it's just a one-sided, thing. And also, like, what a great way for us to affirm the worth of our neighbors and those that are nearest to us, that we can build trust and camaraderie. And it's not just you can only care for me, or you can only be let into the more intimate parts of my life if you know Jesus,
Yeah.
and not if you not. So
Yeah.
um, I love what you're describing. And I think that's a really hard thing. One of the things I've learned from people who've grown up in church cultures, it's a really hard thing to reckon with, because again, it's so much of how do I get to know someone? And we're often leveraging that, not really to get to know them, but when can I work in the pitch
Yep.
to get them to this church service or to this gathering? And it's a very humbling thing when we realize like God has more for us in his kingdom than just being inviters to church gatherings. And yeah, something we should be thinking through. So I love that you're describing that. You really honed in on, though, the humility of being served and cared for. And I think a lot of folks who know you or have followed any of our Renaissance stuff know that you went through something incredibly traumatic in the last year and a half. But maybe just talk to us about the fire that took place at your home and what it was like to experience an outpouring of love and support from your neighbors as you were going through that.
Yeah, so April of 2024, I want to say April 2nd, or 1st, I can't even remember anymore. My wife jumps out of bed at 5 a.m. and she hurries to the front window, and our bedroom faces the street, and she says, "Hey, there's smoke billowing out of the house next door, and there's a guy standing on the second floor, kind of roof, and he's yelling for help, for help. I think there's a fire." And we both got dressed really quickly, woke up our boys, hurriedly, but we weren't frantic because we just thought, okay, like the house next door is on fire. We better get out of our house. And, our second floor tenant had started running up and down the stairs saying, "Fire, fire, wake up, there's a fire." And we got out. I'm pretty sure I sent you, Jason, Christine a text pretty soon after that. With no picture, not a lot of context. I said, "Hey guys, there's a fire at my house." And that's all I said, I think. I don't even remember. I think that's like how the text was at first. It didn't really get back to you guys right away either.
Yeah,
after
it seemed
that.
it kind of seemed nonchalant. Like it didn't seem
Yeah,
like
yeah,
all caps. It was kind of like, yeah, this is a big inconvenience. And
right, right.
yeah,
But 5 hours later, we had lost everything. The fire had started next door, had caught onto our house, so the whole roof burned, the whole back of our house burned. The third floor where we live burned the most, about halfway through, but all the other floors had so much water damage. So basically, everybody lost everything. My parents lived on the first floor. We had tenants on the second floor. We were on the third floor. Two people passed away in the fire next door. A little girl, she was 10 years old. Another man who lived in that home. For those of you who might understand fires, it was a 6-alarm fire, which means 6 fire stations responded to the fire. It was 128 firefighters fighting the fire. It was a serious, serious fire that the whole city surrounding area could see because it was burning so hot. If I'm not mistaken, you may have turned on the news and then that's how you realized, right? Because I don't think I ever got back to you.
I think on Twitter I saw the Boston Fire Department a picture, and they were on not the house that was burning, but a house behind it, and I saw them spraying the back of your house where I've stood
Yeah,
on your deck and where your
yeah,
kitchen is, and I was like, it's gone. Like the kitchen is gone.
yeah,
And I was like, that's what dawned on me. Like I started freaking out and texting people like, this is a really big deal. And, because we weren't hearing from you. And
yeah.
yeah, the realization was like, oh no, this isn't an inconvenience. Like this is like,
Well, what's
are
funny
they,
is you saw
are
before me.
yeah,
I didn't know that fire was
yeah,
like that
yeah.
bad. You knew before I even knew how bad the fire was because I was standing on the street in front of the house. So I didn't even have a concept of how bad the back of my house was burning. Um, so, you're like stuck in trauma at that point. You really don't know what to do, what's
Mm,
next. Um, so this is where, yeah, I think I've shared this with you guys and, personally in our texts and our conversations. And we alluded to this in the beginning, but I felt like God called me to East Boston to be here and to serve the neighborhood and love the neighborhood. And
Mm.
um, I think we've tried our best to be faithful to that. Not always perfect, but we've tried faithfully to serve as much as we could. And um, we have such a wide network of friends and just acquaintances here. Um, and not just in our neighborhood, but very much in our neighborhood that it just felt like that day, you have our Eastie crew who immediately sprung into action where people running to Target to buy us like buy clothes for the boys because our boys left in flip-flops and t-shirts and sweatshirts, and it was a cold day that day. It was
Hmm.
still kind of winter temps, and thankfully it wasn't freezing, so they were able to fight the
No,
fire. Um,
moment of humor. I'm sure no one was brave
yeah,
enough to buy you clothes, knowing the
no, no,
how
absolutely
much
not.
how much your style matters to you. Yeah.
Nope, yep, no clothes for
Trauma or
me.
not, don't buy Fab clothes.
Don't buy Fab clothes. They knew. They didn't even bother. They bought me socks and they weren't sure they wanted to show me the socks. I'm not even kidding. They're like, we got you some socks, but I don't know if you're going to wear them. I
Uh,
do still have the socks because I intentionally kept those socks as a
mm,
reminder for how people loved on us.
mm.
Even if I wouldn't pick them myself, I do wear them.
Nice.
Um, but there's texts flying. I start getting texts, so they taking Kem and the boys at one of the homes, and now their
Mm,
stuff starts flooding into this home. They start texting people, hey, like Kem and Fab, their house burned, like here's their sizes, and the neighbors, they lost stuff, so now clothes, toothpaste, deodorant, socks, underwear, shoes, things start flooding into this house within hours. The house is still on fire and stuff's showing up at this house. Um, and before getting into more detail, what I felt like happened that day, looking back now, is that for about a decade plus, we had been in the neighborhood doing our best to serve the neighborhood. And it was like every person we had ever touched, even in passing,
mm,
somehow, all at the same time, heard of our need, and they all came to serve us at the same time. And it's just such an overwhelming thing to live through, to just be like, I literally have nothing left. My house burned down. I have the clothes that I'm wearing. That's all I have now. And to have people just willingly give their time, their finances to go out, buy things for us. Um, before the fire is even put out, my boss at work calls me and says, "Don't get a hotel," and then tells me that my company wants to put us up in their corporate apartments for at least 3 weeks to help us get on our catch our feet, catch our breath, just have a place to take a shower. Then they find out that my parents were affected, and they give us two apartments, one for me, one for my parents. Part of our Eastie crew, we have friends who have a basement apartment. They had already offered it to us. And then we said, well, like my job's giving me this place, so like we'll take them up on that for now. I was like, we're trying to figure out what to do with our tenants. They said, don't even worry about it. Your tenants can come stay with us. And they
mm.
lived, our second floor tenants stayed with them for over a month and a half almost till they found a place to live. And then finally when they found a place to live, our friends sent us a text and they said, thank you for the opportunity to serve your friends.
Mm.
You know, um, people were giving financially to us, people I hadn't seen in so long. There's a Eastie Fire Fund that started here, not just for us, but all of our neighbors. I think that got over like $65,000 raised, just kind of grassroots in our neighborhood. Um, you know, our local politicians, I've got a few of them here in the neighborhood, state level, city level, checking in. How are you? Is everything okay?
Mm.
These are people I develop relationships with, serving on the board, and again, just being part of neighborhood activities. Um, uh, these are things after being at the corporate apartments. Then we're like, what are we going to do next? We found a place for my parents to live on the same block of our home that burned, which is really cool. Then one of the board members of the board that I'm on reached out to me and was like, hey, my wife and I, we live over here in Winthrop, which is the next city over from our neighborhood, and said, we've got a furnished apartment downstairs. My wife and I want you guys to come live here until you find a place to live. Now, this is somebody that I serve with on the board for sure, but we've got about 6 board meetings a year, and then, a big event every year. So I saw them 7 times a year, maybe. I knew them, but it's just kind of like a board. And for anybody who served on a board, you get on this meeting, and at this point we're doing it on Zoom. So it's like you kind of go through business stuff. It's not a lot of chit chat, right? Like not a ton of the necessarily personal stuff, although I overshare if you know anything about me. So I find ways to make business things personal. But and he reached out. He's like, yep, we just want you to live here. We're not going to charge you. We have it. It's empty. We want you to stay. We want your boys to be comfortable. So we got to live there, I remember when we finally rented this place we're living in now, and I will say that Renaissance as a community held us up in prayer through giving to us financially. Microchurches, individuals, you started a fund for us, and people started to give that way. And the day we were going to move in, it was so cool to see like all these different parts of my life coming together, where people from the neighborhood were here helping us move in, and you guys were here helping us move in, and people from my old church life were helping us move in. And again, it was like all this culmination of people giving to me. And again, up until that point, even up to the fire, even though I've had moments of letting people serve me, it wasn't a way of life where I let people serve me, and where there was mutual. It was always about, how can I serve? What can I do? That's what Jesus calls us to do. We must serve. We must sacrifice. It's almost like drilled in our mind, right? From a young age, serve, give, do. At least, well, if it's a good church, that's what's drilled in your mind. But that can go in such an unhealthy way, where you don't let people serve you. You don't let people use their gifts. You don't let people have the opportunity to feel the warmth of what it means to serve somebody else, right? So I had no choice this time. It's like, I got nothing. I have to let people serve me now. And it's something I'll never forget. We have so many thank you letters we have to write. I feel like until we're done rebuilding this house, I don't even have the headspace yet for it, but there will be a day where I write everybody back and thank them for what they did. And I know people know how much it means to me, but I just want to give them something to remember,
Yeah.
Wow, you held us up in the worst moment of our life, really, or one of the worst moments.
Well, that's why, I clearly wore this shirt on purpose.
Yeah.
It takes a village.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I can honestly say, like, it was, I don't want to discount our Renaissance network. There were some great things that some folks did. Obviously, a lot of financial sacrifice, but someone who's worked in church space my entire life, like when this was first going on, all I could think of is what I've always done in any other church setting. I need, like, how do we rally people? How do we care for them? They need us. And I can honestly say that in those first few weeks, it was like actually hard because most of your needs were being taken care of. And we had to really work on I think we're going to actually just be a nuisance if we try to inject ourselves. And I think that's so beautiful, because I think that's a story of we talk about, what does it look like to embed ourselves in the rhythms and rituals of our neighborhood? So much so that we become a character in the drama of the story that's unfolding. If I have the belief that God is the author of the story that is being told. There is a story being told in my place that is bigger than me. It's a story that started before I was alive. It's a story that's going to go on well after I live. And all I can do is try to be a character in the story of that I'm not divorcing myself from it. I'm not hiding out in my little Christian clique. I'm joining God in the story that he's telling. So much so that I become a character in that, a known character. And I think your story is a perfect example of that. Like, because of who the time that you've spent to build relationships, to build rapport, to know people, to care for people, the outpouring, and again, you don't do it for that reason, but the outpouring was just a showcase of how embedded you really were in Eastie, to the point that it was like, I think there's some things we can do, but it's not easy. And it's like, we're going to have to be creative and work hard, which I think, shouldn't that actually be true for all of us?
Yes.
That we are so embedded where we're at, and we have such great relationships, that our only network when we're in need isn't just spiritual church friends.
Yeah. And ideally, it wouldn't be just in case in an emergency.
Yes, but just in general, yeah.
In day-to-day life, right? That it would be that way. And we, and just thinking about the topic of today's chat, everything I've described is me being discipled. I know I haven't used that language yet, but I'm becoming more like Christ as I live in my neighborhood, as I interact with people, as I serve them, as they serve me. I learn from them. I can see the Imago Dei in everyone, because we're all God's creation. So every interaction I'm having, I find that I am more aware and observant of who God is in people than I ever have been before in a pew, Again, there's nothing wrong with that. That's not the point, but no. I'm spending time that I would be in the pews, in the streets, at my neighbors' homes. You think about Jesus. We talk about discipleship. Well, what was discipleship? It was Jesus and his buddies walking around from town to town, meeting people, having meals with people, sleeping in people's homes, sleeping out in the street, in the hills, whatever it may be. But they were living life together, and they were meeting people and making relationships and moving along, right? That's how they were growing. That's how Jesus was trying to show them, this is how you can be like me. This is what it means to be Christ-like. This is what it means to usher in the kingdom. And, so many times we're like, oh, it's about how much you know, how much information you could take in, how much theology. When in actuality, the way Jesus was teaching, yes, sure, they had synagogues. I'm not discounting any of that. But if that's all we do, then it just becomes theory and head knowledge. And we have a very difficult time putting it into practice. I knew that, it's better to be served than it's better to serve than be served, whatever. But I wasn't letting anybody else serve me, right? I was always self-sacrificing, and to the point where it was very unhealthy. So to me, just a part of discipleship, a major part of discipleship, needs to be walking with Christ in your place, wherever that may be. Mm-hmm. Maybe you don't live in a neighborhood. It's I'm in a dense urban area, so when you think of a neighborhood in the movies, that's what I live in. But that's not the case for everyone. But what does it mean to be walking with Jesus in the place that you are, at work, whatever extracurriculars, in your suburban town or city, at school? I think it's important to figure out what's going on and how can you be a part of that. Because in that, I think the growth we experience far outweighs the serving we could ever do.
Yeah.
Far outweighs. There's nothing I could do here to solve any of East Boston's woes by myself, by any means. But the growth I've experienced in learning about who God is, brings me back to sitting on the train and feeling compassion for strangers I had never met. But now I feel that all the time for people I do know.
Yep. Yep.
something I didn't feel before, you know?
Well, I love it. I mean, we could spend another hour just talking about what you're just describing there, because I think it is so true. Like, there are so many people in our network that what you're describing is the journey they've been on. I know it's my story too. Like, I went into placemaking and mission thinking primarily of how do I save people? How do I transform a place? And what I discovered was there was a spirituality there that God was like, yes, finally, you are in the real world with real
Mm-hmm.
people.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are humble enough, um, I have so much to teach you, and I have so much I'm going to do in you. And so again, we only think about outputs. We only think about what we can do. I don't hear very many people describe, like, we think about discipleship in a classroom. I need to take the discipleship course at my church, or I need to read the books, and then I go out and do mission. And I don't hear very many people describe, like, no, like, in the work of going and trying to join God where I'm at, trying to be faithful in my place. That is actually the best classroom for what God's going
Yes,
to want to teach me. And
100%.
and then secondarily, like what you're describing, and I sense this all the time with people in my own neighborhood. How in the world can we help people understand God if we basically tell them they have nothing to offer until they show up with us to church and, make a confession
Yeah.
of faith, and then suddenly they have some, but up until then, your humanity was worthless.
Yeah.
Rather than saying, no, you said the words, you're an imago Dei, you're made in the image of God, Genesis chapter 1, 26 and 27. You have been given gifts and talents. And some people, you're actually right on the doorstep of God's dream. You just might not be claiming God, but
Mm-hmm.
you're right on the doorstep, or you're maybe walking in it, and you just haven't given him credit for it yet.
Yeah.
But you have something to offer. You have gifts and talents. You have been created in God's image with a purpose to do good in this world. And if I never let you give that to me, if you're never allowed to use that, if I never affirm that you have value and that I need you as much as you need me, how in the world can we help some of the folks in our neighborhoods begin to step into faith and realize the beauty of who God has created them to be, and that there is an author behind the story that they're already living in, if we tell them that their story is worthless until they come and sit in a pew
Mm.
and listen to a clergy member? And so I love what you're describing, because there are people around me, I see it all the time, that I want to affirm that goodness. One of the simple ways we talk about this all the time is the church often loves to start with Genesis 3. We love to talk about with the fall, that you're dirty
Mm-hmm.
and rotten and a
Mm-hmm.
sinner and you're evil, that you're a mess. But what happens when we start with Genesis 1 and say, no, everything God created was good
Yeah.
initially. And our humanity at its base level, yeah, we mess things up and we have a propensity to screw up all the time. And we need to talk about that. We need to name that. We need to name the mess that's going on in our world. And obviously, that is a great place for us to wake up to God. But we first need to understand that we have value, and our value is already there. We don't have to do, our belovedness is already there. We don't have to do anything extra to earn it. And Christian or non-Christian alike, I have something to offer the world, and I'm already beloved. Well before I might recognize who offered me that belovedness.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it means to be part of this journey, is that I think it's both and. God's teaching us through that, but he's also like, that is, what a great message, and something that we can't declare as much as we have to embody and practice. Because I think people, especially in a place like Boston, especially like a place like New England, they can sniff it on you real quick if they don't think you think they have any value or worth.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're not genuine.
Yeah.
One of the things, what you were sharing makes me think of, um, our friend group, there's some who are Catholics, and many are not religious at all, but they know who we are and what we believe. And one of the things I've shared with our group when conversations come up naturally, religion could come up from time to time. But one of the things I describe to them, which is I don't know if a rule of life is the right way to describe how I view people now, but I can only know God's character as much as I know them.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, God created me in a unique way. So, like, I know myself and I know maybe what characteristics of God may exist through who I am, but that's very limited. I am not all of God. I am not all of his characteristics. I am not all of his ways. So then I meet you and I'm like, okay, I know a little more about God now because I know who Drew is. I know who God made him to be, and I know what gifts God's given him. But that's true of non-Christians as well, because God created them and he gave them gifts and he made them unique. So if I'm not spending time getting to know them, I can never truly know God fully because I don't know them. I don't see the little pieces of God that's walking all around me all the time,
Mm-hmm.
because we spend so much time hiding from people sometimes in Christianity because we don't want to sin or give appearance of sin or whatever. And we don't realize that maybe, I don't know, light bulb went off. Maybe that's why we spend so much time in our books and listening to sermons, because, well, we're not experiencing God out in the world in everyday life. So we have to retreat inside our walls and focus to Christian materials to tell us who God is, because we don't live it. So we have to hear about it. We have to read about it. But if we just spent 2 seconds looking for who God is in everyone, regardless of whether they claim him to be God or not, we believe that that's true anyway. So let's put that to the side. And now let's start to look at who is God in these people? How is the Holy Spirit working in them and trying to draw them to him, right? I have learned so much more about God this last decade than ever before, simply because I think about my friends who serve, my friends who love to cook meals, and that's their love language, right? They want to make a home cooked meal and invite us over. Our friends who open up their doors just for people to be together. Our friends who are so giving and thoughtful. Things that I am not always that way. I am not a great host. I don't love being, inconvenienced. I grumble a lot. We talked about this the other day. Like, I'm a grumbler, I'm a complainer. Those are not natural gifts that I have. So when I see my friends doing that, I think, man, that is God, and I should be more of that.
Mm-hmm. Well, hopefully everyone's stuck with us, because that was worth the whole podcast right there. Those few minutes. Um, Thank you. And that's so beautiful, because I think that's a perfect description, and I don't think I could say it any better than that. So I'm not going to try to. We're kind of coming towards the end of our episode, but I'd love to give you just one more chance. What advice would you give other folks who are interested in walking through the idea that you just described? Maybe this is all new to them. They've grown up in church spaces that all they know is church programs and gatherings. Or maybe they're just pretty new to faith, and all they can imagine is just showing up in Christian spaces. So what do you think would be the good beginning point for people who are beginning maybe where you were 10 years ago?
Yeah, I'd say, and this is a great plug for our discernment dinners. Look those up on our website if you're around. But number one, understand, what do you like? What do you like to do? Who are you as a person, right? What are your gifts? And not so that you can use them to serve others, but to understand how you naturally work, right? One of the first ever things I did that set off a chain reaction of these relationships here in our neighborhood was, I enjoy working out. I have not always been great about it over the years, but I go through spurts. And there was this free outdoor workout in the neighborhood. I heard about it. I just showed up. I didn't know anybody. It was like 20, 25 people who all knew each other, all doing this week in, week out. I just came. I started working out. I started to make friends. And then that unraveled into so many different opportunities. So, like, what's one small thing? It's not not be like Fabricio and have 10 neighborhood things that you're doing and serve on multiple boards and whatever, right? That's years down the line, but find something that you love to do and do it in your place and keep doing it. It's not once, it's not show up twice, it's you be faithful to make a commitment, be faithful to it, and keep showing up. Now, ideally, there's other people there, right? You're not showing up to something by yourself, but you're starting to develop relationships. You're starting to meet people. That's it. Just take a day. If you need to clear out your calendar, think about what is something that I can let go of so that I can make space to be present in a place that I'm at. If your calendar's too full, then something's got to go. Maybe even that's the pre-step, right? Is taking a look at your life and figuring out, do I have margin for 2 hours a week to be at the same place all the time? Every Thursday, every Friday, every Saturday morning, I'm going to go get coffee at the same place and I'm going to linger for an hour. I don't know. It could be as simple as that, eating, right? Eating opens so many doors. Find a place where you can eat at week in, week out. I go to Meridian Market, I walk in, I don't have to tell them my order. They know what my order is. They make my chicken cutlet Caesar wrap before I even open my mouth. And all I'm doing is talking to the owner about, hey, how's life going? He lives in New Hampshire. How's the commute? What have you been doing lately? Hey, what's your family going to do for the holidays? Right? We're getting to know each other because I just keep going there, right? And we have those conversations. So I would say simply pick something, be invested, be repetitive, and have the right motives. Not to go in to save the world, not because everybody's a sinner and they need Jesus and you got to find the first opportunity to tell them that all the Jesus things that you got to vomit out, just go, just be present, but do it continuously.
That's really good. And I'm impressed that you didn't work in a hot take earlier on your passion for chicken and how many people ruin it. Cold cuts, cutlets. You've got.
Yeah, that
we
might have to
we
be
won't
for
go
another
there.
call.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah.
save. We'll sit that one for another call. Chicken cutlets.
No, but I think that's great advice, and probably something we'll end up talking about in a future episode. The compounded interest of small acts, faithful acts, over a long period of time in our place. And I think that is such great advice. Just keep showing up, trusting that if you do, God's got something to teach you. And beautiful things are going to happen in just the messiness and the webs that get formed in neighborhood life. So
as long as you're listening and willing to step in, right? Beautiful things will happen.
Yep. You don't have to worry. You don't have to force them. You don't have to worry about them. Well, I think we'll probably call it there. I think this has been an awesome episode. Fab, I know you kidded around about being canceled, but I'm sure this is the first of many episodes you're going to be on talking to us about your wisdom of practitionership. If you're listening to us, thanks for joining us. We can't wait just to continue this journey with you and walk you through some of the realities of what it means to join God in the everyday. We flip back and forth between practitionership and microchurch realities. This one was more practitionership, but keep tuning in. If you want to find out more about the Renaissance Network, from our microchurches to future cohorts, head to wearerenaissance.org. And with that, in the words of Christine Lee, bye.
Bye.